You know how some conversations stick with you forever? The kind that replay in your head months later, word for word, like a broken record you can't turn off? Well, my wife gave me one of those conversations on a random Thursday evening that changed everything between us. We were sitting at our kitchen table, having what I thought was a normal dinner. She was picking at her salad while scrolling through her phone, which had become her usual routine. I had just finished telling her about my day, hoping for some kind of engagement, some sign that she actually cared about what was happening in my life. Instead, she looked up from her phone with this expression I had never seen before. Cold, detached, like she was looking at a stranger who had overstayed their welcome. "You know what?" she said, setting her fork down with deliberate precision. "I'm tired of you expecting things from me all the time." I paused mid-bite, genuinely confused. "What are you talking about? This whole thing where you think I should care about your problems, listen to your stories, be interested in your life. The way you look at me like I owe you something." The air in the room shifted. This wasn't our usual bickering about dishes or bills. This was different. Darker. "I'm your husband," I said slowly. "Caring about each other is kind of how marriage works." She laughed. Actually laughed. Not a warm, amused laugh, but something sharp and dismissive that made my stomach drop. "Let me be crystal clear about something," she said, leaning forward slightly. "I have absolutely no obligation to satisfy you. None. Not emotionally, not physically, not in any way whatsoever. That's not what this relationship is about." I sat there, fork halfway to my mouth, trying to process what I had just heard. In 8 years of marriage, through all our ups and downs, she had never spoken to me with such calculated indifference. "So what exactly is this relationship about then?" I asked. "It's about me living my life the way I want to live it, and you figuring out how to be okay with that. I'm not here to make you happy. That's your job." The words hit me like a physical blow, not because they were cruel, but because of how casually she delivered them, like she was telling me the weather forecast. I finished chewing slowly, set my fork down, and looked at her. Really looked at her. When had she become this person? When had the woman I married turned into someone who could sit across from me and essentially tell me I meant nothing to her? "Interesting perspective," I said finally. She seemed pleased with my calm response. "I'm glad you understand. I was worried this would turn into some big dramatic thing." "Oh no, nothing dramatic here. Just trying to understand the new rules." "They're not new rules. They're just the rules I should have established a long time ago." I nodded slowly, taking a sip of water. "And these rules, they apply both ways, right?" She waved her hand dismissively. "Of course. You do whatever you want. I don't care." "Good to know." The rest of dinner passed in silence. She went back to scrolling through her phone, completely satisfied with the conversation we had just had. Meanwhile, I was doing calculations in my head. If she had no obligation to satisfy me, then logic dictated that I had no obligation to satisfy her either. None whatsoever. Not financially, not emotionally, not domestically. Nothing. She had just rewritten the terms of our marriage without realizing she had given me the same freedom she was claiming for herself. After dinner, she wandered off to watch her shows while I cleaned up. As I loaded the dishwasher, I found myself replaying her words. The complete certainty in her voice. The casual way she had dismissed 8 years of marriage vows. That night, as she slept peacefully beside me, apparently unburdened by our conversation, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. She had drawn a line in the sand, thinking she was establishing her independence. What she had actually done was hand me a roadmap for mine. By morning, I had made a decision that would change both of our lives forever. She wanted to redefine our marriage? Fine. But she was about to learn that redefinitions work both ways. And unlike her, I wouldn't need to announce my new rules. I would simply live by them. The next morning, I woke up with perfect clarity. She had established the rules. No obligations. No expectations. Complete independence within marriage. Well, two could play that game. I started small. Instead of making coffee for both of us like I had every morning for years, I made exactly 1 cup. Mine. When she stumbled into the kitchen expecting her usual morning routine, she found an empty coffee maker and me reading the news on my phone. "Did you forget something?" she asked, pointing at the coffee maker. I looked up from my phone with genuine confusion. "I don't think so. What did I forget?" "My coffee." "Oh, that. Well, like you said yesterday, you have no obligation to satisfy me, and I have no obligation to satisfy you. Making your coffee would be satisfying you, wouldn't it?" She stared at me for a long moment. Are you being serious right now? Completely serious. You were very clear about the new arrangement. I'm just following your lead. She shook her head and muttered something under her breath while making her own coffee. I could see the wheels turning, but she wasn't quite ready to admit she might have miscalculated. Over the next few days, I systematically removed myself from every small gesture that had become routine. No more asking how her day was. No more listening to her complaints about work or friends. No more offering solutions to her problems. When she tried to vent to me about her difficult boss, I simply said, "That sounds frustrating," and went back to whatever I was doing. When she expected me to take her side in some drama with her sister, I just shrugged and said, "Not my problem to solve." The beauty of it was that I wasn't being cruel or vindictive. I was just applying her own logic consistently. By the end of the first week, she was getting agitated. "You're being weird," she announced one evening as I prepared dinner for exactly one person. "Weird how? You're acting like we're roommates or something." I paused in my cooking and looked at her thoughtfully. Roommates who split bills and share living space, but have no emotional obligations to each other? Yeah, that's pretty accurate actually. That's not what I meant when I said what I said. Really? Because you were pretty specific. You said you have no obligation to satisfy me in any way. I believed you. I respected your position. And now I'm living accordingly. She was quiet for a moment, watching me plate my single portion of pasta. "Are you making enough for both of us?" she asked. "Nope, just me. But there's plenty of ingredients if you want to make your own." "This is ridiculous." "Is it? You established that we don't owe each other anything. I'm just being consistent with your framework." That night, she tried a different approach. She attempted to initiate a conversation about our relationship, probably expecting me to apologize and beg for things to go back to normal. Instead, I listened politely and then said, "I understand you might be having second thoughts, but I actually think your original position was brilliant. This no obligation thing is incredibly liberating. I should have thought of it years ago." The look on her face was priceless. She had expected anger, pleading, maybe even threats to leave. She hadn't expected enthusiastic agreement. "You're doing this to punish me," she said. "Punish you? For what? You didn't do anything wrong. You just clarified the terms of our relationship. I'm grateful for the clarity, honestly. But this isn't how marriage is supposed to work." I almost laughed. "According to who? You just spent last week telling me exactly how our marriage works. No obligations. No expectations. Complete independence. I'm just the slow learner catching up to your enlightened perspective." Over the following days, I watched her carefully. She was starting to realize that the dynamic she thought she wanted wasn't quite as appealing when it was applied universally. When she got a flat tire and called me expecting immediate rescue, I told her, "That's unfortunate. You should probably call roadside assistance." When she ran out of her expensive face cream and expected me to pick some up during my errands, I said, "Sorry, I'm just handling my own stuff today." When she wanted to discuss vacation plans, I informed her that I was planning a solo trip since we had no obligation to coordinate our leisure time. Each interaction was perfectly reasonable by her own stated standards, and each one made her a little more uncomfortable with the world she had created. By the second week, she was watching me like a hawk, trying to figure out my angle, waiting for me to crack and revert to my old accommodating self. But I wasn't cracking. If anything, I was discovering how much energy I had been wasting on someone who had openly admitted she felt no obligation to reciprocate. The most telling moment came when she tried to hand me a bill that had arrived in her name. "Can you handle this?" she asked casually. "Is it my bill?" "Well, no, but you usually. Right, it's your bill, so you should handle it. Unless you're saying you have some kind of obligation to let me manage your finances? Because I thought we established that obligations don't exist in this relationship." She stood there holding the bill, clearly frustrated but unable to argue with her own logic. That evening, as she sat on the couch obviously expecting me to join her for our usual evening routine, I headed toward the bedroom with a book. "Where are you going?" she asked. "To read in bed. More comfortable. But we always watch our show together on Wednesdays." "Actually, it's your show. I just used to watch it because I thought I was supposed to. But since obligations don't apply anymore, I'm free to spend my evening however I want." As I closed the bedroom door behind me, I could hear her muttering in the living room. The shift was happening faster than I had expected. She had wanted independence without consequences, freedom without responsibility. What she was getting was exactly what she asked for, applied with mathematical precision. And she was beginning to realize that maybe, just maybe, she hadn't thought this through as carefully as she believed. By the third week, I decided it was time to take things up a notch. Small daily inconveniences were one thing, but if we were truly operating as independent entities sharing a living space, then our financial arrangements needed to reflect that reality too. I started with our streaming services. We had joint accounts for everything: Netflix, Spotify, Amazon Prime, the works. Since she had no obligation to consider my entertainment preferences and I had no obligation to fund hers, it made perfect sense to separate these expenses. Why did Netflix ask me to update payment information? She asked one morning, staring at her phone with confusion. Oh, I removed the joint account. You'll need to set up your own subscription if you want to keep watching your shows. But we've shared that account for years. Right. But that was when we had mutual obligations. Now that we're independent operators, it makes more sense for everyone to handle their own subscriptions. More freedom for both of us to choose exactly what we want. She opened her mouth to argue, then seemed to realize she had no ground to stand on. After all, she was the one who established that we owed each other nothing. Next came the grocery situation. Instead of shopping for both of us like I had been doing, I started buying exactly what I needed and storing it separately. I got a mini fridge for my bedroom and started keeping my food there. Where's all the food? She asked, opening our nearly empty main refrigerator. I moved my stuff to my room. Since we're not obligated to feed each other, I figured it made sense to separate our groceries. Avoids any confusion about who's eating what. This is insane, is it? Think about it logically. You made it clear that you don't want the burden of considering my needs. Well, I don't want the burden of wondering whether I'm overstepping by eating something you bought, or whether you feel obligated to share food you paid for. This way, we both have complete autonomy. The look on her face told me she was starting to understand the full implications of her philosophy, but I wasn't done yet. Our joint checking account had been bothering me. Why should someone who felt no obligation to satisfy me have access to money I earned? That seemed fundamentally unfair to both of us. I opened my own account and redirected my direct deposit. Then I calculated exactly half of our shared expenses: mortgage, utilities, insurance, and set up automatic payments from my new account to cover my portion. What's this? She asked, holding up a statement I had left on the counter detailing the new financial arrangement. Just reorganizing our finances to better reflect our relationship structure. I'm covering exactly 50% of our shared living expenses. Everything else is separate now. You can't just unilaterally change our entire financial setup. Actually, I can. Just like you unilaterally changed our relationship dynamic. I'm just adapting to the new reality you created. She stared at the paper, doing quick mental calculations. I could see her realizing that half the mortgage payment was significantly more than she usually contributed to household expenses. This isn't fair. I make less money than you do. That's true. But fairness based on income assumes we have mutual obligations to support each other. You were very clear that such obligations don't exist. So 50-50 seems like the most equitable split for two independent people sharing living space. But what about groceries, dinners out, clothes, gas for my car? What about them? Those are your personal expenses. Just like mine are my personal expenses. You wanted independence, remember? The color was draining from her face as the full scope of financial independence dawned on her. That evening, she tried a different strategy. She made a nice dinner and set the table for two, clearly hoping to reset the dynamic between us. I made your favorite, she said with a forced smile when I walked into the kitchen. That's thoughtful, but I already ate. Plus, that's your food from your grocery budget. I wouldn't want to put you out. I made it for both of us. But why would you do that? You don't have any obligation to feed me, and I don't have any obligation to eat what you prepare. Seems like a waste of your resources. She stood there with serving spoons in her hands, looking completely lost. Can we just sit down and eat dinner together like normal people? What's normal about it? You've been very clear that normal marriage expectations don't apply to us. If you want to change the rules again, you need to be explicit about it. I'm not changing any rules. I just made dinner. Right? You made dinner. For yourself. Because you felt like it. That's completely fine. But don't expect me to pretend this is some gesture of care or obligation, because you've established that those don't exist in our relationship. The next few days were fascinating to watch. She kept trying to do things that looked like normal wife behavior, but every time I responded according to her stated philosophy, she got frustrated. When she bought coffee beans and made a full pot, clearly expecting me to partake, I thanked her but explained that I had my own coffee set up now and didn't want to impose on her generosity. When she suggested we go out to dinner, I told her that sounded nice, but I'd need her to cover her own meal since we weren't operating as a financial unit anymore. When she tried to plan a weekend trip for both of us, I reminded her that we had established complete independence, so if she wanted to travel, she should absolutely do that, but I would be making my own separate plans. Each interaction followed her logic perfectly, and each one left her looking more confused and frustrated. The breakthrough moment came when she got a surprise expense. Her car needed major repairs that cost more than she had readily available. She approached me tentatively. My car needs about $1,500 worth of work. That's expensive. Sorry to hear it. Can you help me cover it? I looked at her with genuine curiosity. Help you how? Pay for part of it. Or all of it. Like you used to when these things came up. But that would mean I have an obligation to solve your financial problems. And you've been very clear that obligations don't exist between us. This is different. This is an emergency. Different how? Either we have mutual obligations or we don't. You can't pick and choose when independence applies based on what's convenient for you. She stood there for a long moment, and I could see her wrestling with the logical trap she had created for herself. So you're just going to let me struggle with this alone? I'm not letting you do anything. You're choosing to handle your own problems as an independent person. Isn't that exactly what you wanted? That night, as she sat at her laptop researching loans and payment plans for her car repair, I could see the wheels turning. She was beginning to understand that independence was a package deal. You couldn't demand freedom from obligations while expecting to keep all the benefits that came from having those same obligations. By the fourth week, the panic had set in. She was scrambling to figure out how to manage her new financial reality, and more importantly, she was starting to realize that the husband she had taken for granted wasn't coming back to rescue her. The first sign of her desperation came on a Friday evening. I was in my room reading when she knocked on the door. Actually knocked. On the bedroom door of the house we both lived in. Can I come in? She asked through the door. It's your house too. You don't need permission. She opened the door hesitantly and stood in the doorway like she was entering foreign territory. Which, in a way, she was. What are you reading? She asked, her voice unusually soft. Just a book about financial planning. Trying to optimize my budget now that I'm only responsible for my own expenses. She winced. Can we talk? We're talking now. I mean really talk. About us. I closed the book and looked at her. What about us? You've been very clear about what we are to each other. Two independent people sharing living space with no mutual obligations. Maybe I was being too harsh before. Maybe we can find some middle ground. Middle ground between what and what. You either believe people in relationships have obligations to each other, or you don't. There's no middle ground on fundamental philosophy. She sat down on the edge of the bed without being invited, which was interesting. A month ago, she would have just flopped down anywhere assuming she was welcome. Now she was asking permission and making tentative movements. I've been thinking about what I said, and maybe I didn't express myself clearly. You were extremely clear. Remarkably clear, actually. No obligation to satisfy me in any way whatsoever. Those were your exact words. But I didn't mean you should stop caring about me entirely. I tilted my head, genuinely curious. What did you mean then? I meant I didn't want to feel pressured to be someone I'm not. And what pressure was I putting on you exactly? Expecting you to care about my day, hoping you'd show interest in my life, wanting some kind of emotional connection with my wife. She was quiet for a long moment. When you put it like that, it sounds reasonable. It was reasonable, but you labeled it as obligation and rejected it entirely. So I respected your position and stopped expecting those things. But now you don't care about my day either. Correct. Why would I? You established that caring about each other's daily experiences isn't part of our relationship. She looked genuinely confused, like she couldn't understand how her words had led to this outcome. Over the next few days, she started making increasingly obvious attempts to re-engage me. She began asking about my work, trying to start conversations about movies we used to watch together, even suggesting we take walks in the evening. Each time, I responded politely but consistently. That's nice that you're interested, but but I don't really see the point in sharing details about my work life with someone who has no obligation to care about it. I appreciate the suggestion, but since we're both free to pursue our own entertainment independently, I'll probably just watch something on my own setup. Walks sound healthy. You should definitely do that. I prefer to exercise alone these days. By the second week of her new approach, the attempts were getting more desperate. She started cooking elaborate meals and insisting there were leftovers if I wanted them. She bought coffee beans that happened to be my favorite brand. She even suggested we split some of our separate subscriptions to save money. "I'm not trying to manipulate you," she said one evening after I had politely declined another invitation to rejoin our old routines. "I just miss this. Us." "What us? The version where I had expectations you resented? Or the current version where we're both completely free to live exactly as we choose?" I want something in between. There is no in between. Either we're partners with mutual obligations, or we're roommates with separate lives. You can't have the benefits of partnership while rejecting the responsibilities. The turning point came when she tried to initiate physical intimacy. She approached me one evening wearing a dress she knew I liked, clearly hoping to reset our relationship through attraction. "I thought maybe we could spend some time together tonight," she said with a smile that looked rehearsed. That's a generous offer, but physical intimacy implies a level of mutual obligation and emotional connection that you've specifically rejected. It would be inconsistent with the boundaries you've established. The smile fell from her face. "Are you seriously going to apply your weird logic to this too?" "It's not my logic. It's your logic. You said you have no obligation to satisfy me. Well, I have no obligation to satisfy you either. Physical intimacy is definitely satisfying someone, wouldn't you agree?" She stared at me with a mixture of frustration and disbelief. "This is insane. Married people are supposed to be intimate. According to who? You just got done telling me that supposed doesn't apply to our relationship. We do what we want to do, when we want to do it, with no obligations to each other. Remember? That night, I could hear her crying in the living room. Part of me felt bad for her, but a larger part of me realized she was crying about the consequences of her own choices, not about anything I had done to her. She had wanted to rewrite the rules of our marriage to eliminate her responsibilities while keeping all her privileges. When I applied the same rules equally, suddenly the game wasn't fun anymore. The next morning, she was waiting for me in the kitchen with coffee made for both of us and a serious expression on her face. "We need to fix this," she said without preamble. "Fix what? Everything is working exactly as you designed it." "No, it's not. This isn't what I wanted." "Then you probably should have been more careful about what you asked for." She took a deep breath. "I want to go back to the way things were." "Which way? The way where I had expectations you resented? The way where you felt obligated to care about my satisfaction? Because that's what you were complaining about in the first place." "I was wrong." "About what specifically?" About all of it. About obligations. About satisfaction. About what marriage means." I sipped my coffee and studied her face. The desperation was real. The panic was real. But was the understanding real, or was she just trying to manipulate me back into my old role? "Interesting," I said finally. "Tell me more about what you think marriage means." She took a shaky breath and sat down across from me. For the first time in weeks, she looked genuinely vulnerable instead of strategically manipulative. "Marriage means we're supposed to care about each other. We're supposed to want to make each other happy. We're supposed to be a team." Supposed to according to who? According to common sense. According to the vows we made. According to basic human decency. I nodded slowly. "So you're saying married people do have obligations to each other?" "Yes, obviously, even when it's inconvenient. Even when they don't feel like it. Even when it requires sacrifice." She hesitated, sensing the trap. "Yes." "Then you were wrong a month ago when you said you had no obligation to satisfy me in any way." Her face crumpled. "Yes, I was completely wrong. And mean-spirited. And selfish. And cruel." The words hung in the air. She didn't deny them because she couldn't. "I was angry about something stupid and I took it out on you in the worst possible way," she whispered. "What were you angry about?" "Work stuff. Friend drama. I don't even remember anymore. It seems so trivial now." "So you decided to blow up our marriage over trivial annoyances?" I wasn't thinking clearly. I just felt overwhelmed and I wanted someone to blame. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at our backyard. The same backyard where we used to grill together on weekends. Where we used to talk about planting a garden someday. "Do you know what the worst part was?" I said without turning around. Tell me, it wasn't just that you said it. It was how casually you said it. Like you'd been thinking it for years and finally worked up the courage to let me know how little I meant to you. That's not true. You mean everything to me. I turned around and looked at her directly. Do I? Because someone who means everything to you doesn't get dismissed like a bothersome stranger. Someone who means everything to you doesn't get told their needs and feelings are irrelevant. She was crying now, but I wasn't finished. You want to know what I learned about myself these past few weeks? I learned that I'm perfectly capable of living without someone who doesn't want to be bothered with loving me. I learned that I don't actually need someone who sees basic kindness as an unreasonable burden. I don't see it that way anymore. You see it differently now because you've experienced the consequences. But what happens next time you're stressed? Next time work is overwhelming? Next time you need someone to blame for your bad mood? She opened her mouth to speak, but I held up my hand. I'll tell you what happens. You'll remember that you can hurt me whenever you want by withdrawing your care and affection. You'll remember that threatening our connection is an effective way to make me scramble to fix whatever's bothering you. I would never do that again. You said you had no obligation to satisfy me in any way whatsoever. Those words don't just disappear because you're sorry now. The kitchen fell silent except for her quiet crying. So what does this mean for us? She asked finally. I walked back to the table and sat down across from her. It means you taught me something valuable about self-respect, about not accepting treatment I don't deserve, about not begging someone to care about me. I do care about you. You care about the version of me that takes care of you, the version that makes your life easier and more comfortable. But you don't respect me. You don't value me as a person, and you demonstrated that pretty clearly. That's not fair, isn't it? When someone tells you they have no obligation to satisfy you in any way, they're telling you exactly how much they value your happiness, your needs, your feelings. They're telling you that your well-being is completely irrelevant to them. She sat there absorbing the truth of what I was saying. I can't take back what I said, but I can show you that I didn't mean it. How? By being the wife I should have been all along. By caring about your happiness. By making your satisfaction a priority. By treating you like someone I chose to love, not someone I'm stuck with. I studied her face, looking for signs of manipulation or calculation. All I saw was desperation and regret. The problem is, I said slowly, I don't know if I can trust that this isn't just panic talking. I don't know if you actually understand what went wrong, or if you're just scared of losing your comfortable life. It's not about comfort. It's about losing you. Is it? Because a month ago, you seemed perfectly willing to keep me around while making it clear that my emotional needs were irrelevant to you. That doesn't sound like someone who was worried about losing me. She had no answer for that because there was no answer. She had been perfectly content with a marriage where I provided everything and she provided nothing until the day I stopped providing. Now she was discovering that marriage without mutual obligation wasn't actually marriage at all. It was just two people sharing expenses. So where does that leave us? She asked. I looked at her across the table, this woman who had shared my life for 8 years, and realized that the person I had married was still in there somewhere. But she had been buried under layers of entitlement and complacency that I wasn't sure could be stripped away. It leaves us with a choice, I said finally. We can try to rebuild something real, with actual mutual respect and genuine care for each other's well-being. Or we can admit that you killed whatever we had when you decided I wasn't worth the effort of basic kindness. I want to rebuild. I want to try. Trying isn't enough anymore. I need to see fundamental change. Not temporary good behavior because you're scared, but actual transformation in how you view marriage and partnership. She nodded eagerly. Whatever it takes. Here's what it takes. You need to prove to me that you understand marriage is about obligation. Mutual obligation. Joyful obligation. The obligation to care about each other's happiness even when it's inconvenient. Over the following weeks, she tried. She really did. She asked about my day and actually listened to the answers. She started cooking for both of us again. She suggested activities we could do together. But I could see her calculating each gesture, wondering if she had done enough yet to earn forgiveness. She was performing the role of caring wife, not actually becoming one. The test came 6 weeks later when she had a particularly stressful day at work. I watched her carefully as she came home frustrated and exhausted. Would she revert to her old pattern of taking it out on me? She started to snap at me over something trivial, caught herself, and apologized immediately. I'm sorry. I'm just having a terrible day, and I almost made it your problem. It was progress, but it was conscious effort, not natural instinct. She was still thinking of caring about me as work rather than as love. 3 months after our kitchen conversation, I made my decision. We need to talk, I said one evening. She looked terrified. Are you leaving me? That depends on how honest you're willing to be. About what? About whether you actually love me, or whether you just love what I do for you. The question hung between us like a challenge. I love you, she said quickly. Do you? Or do you love having a husband who pays half the mortgage, handles the difficult conversations with service people, fixes things around the house, and provides emotional support when you need it? She opened her mouth to protest, then closed it. Because love means wanting someone's happiness even when it doesn't benefit you. Love means caring about someone's feelings even when they're inconvenient. Love means treating someone with kindness even when you're in a bad mood. I'm learning to do those things. You're learning to perform those things. But they don't come naturally to you. You have to remember to care about me. The truth of it hit her visibly. When you told me you had no obligation to satisfy me, you revealed something fundamental about how you see me. As someone who exists to serve your needs, not as someone whose needs matter equally to yours. I can change. Can you? Because change requires admitting there's something wrong with who you are, not just what you do. And I don't think you believe there's anything wrong with who you are. She was quiet for a long time. You're right, she said finally. I do think about myself first. I do expect you to accommodate me more than I accommodate you. I do take you for granted. And I don't know if I can become someone different. I've been selfish for so long that I don't know how to be genuinely selfless. It was the most honest thing she had said in months. At least now you understand the problem. So what happens now? I looked at this woman who had been my wife, who might still be my wife, who probably shouldn't be my wife anymore. Now you get to live with complete honesty about who you are and what you want. And I get to decide whether that's someone I want to be married to. The conversation ended there, but the real conversation continued in the weeks that followed through our daily interactions. She stopped pretending to be someone she wasn't. She acknowledged her selfishness when it surfaced instead of hiding it. She started asking for what she wanted instead of expecting me to anticipate it. And slowly, something interesting happened. When she stopped performing caring behavior and started honestly communicating her actual thoughts and needs, she occasionally surprised herself by genuinely caring about mine too. 6 months after she told me she had no obligation to satisfy me, we were different people in a different marriage. Not the marriage we started with, and not the marriage she tried to create with her ultimatum. A marriage built on clear expectations, honest communication, and the recognition that love is indeed an obligation. The most important obligation two people can choose to accept. She learned that freedom without responsibility isn't freedom at all. And I learned that respect isn't something you earn by being accommodating. Sometimes you earn it by refusing to accept anything less.